Fauci runs from red wave and no dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, everyone, to Mark and the Millennials. This podcast is called Fauci Runs from Red Wave. Before I start, I just want to give you a short story about my vacation. Yes, I have been away for 2 weeks on vacation. Where else would I go but the free state of Florida? From the not-so-free state of Maryland. You know, Maryland calls itself the free state, but really it's not. So I went to Florida to really be free for 2 weeks. It was really wonderful, I have to admit. And here's the story. I flew back yesterday from Florida to BWI Airport, Baltimore Washington International Airport. And my wife and I got our luggage. And of course, that's a whole other story. I think it took like 35, 40 minutes before the luggage showed up. But hey, welcome to BWI. And then we took the luggage outside. And as you probably know, most airports, you get on a bus with your luggage and the bus takes you to the car lot in which your car is located where you parked it. So my wife and I get our luggage, put it on a bus, hop on the bus. The bus still had like 3 or 4 more stops before it finally took us to our car. And one of the stops we went to for the bus stop, other people, of course, coming home, presumably, these 2 individuals get on the bus. And so I'm going to say something that is incredibly politically incorrect because everybody's afraid to say it. But I'm going to say it because I actually think it's time that we define something that we as conservatives need to talk about more and our objections to what I'm about to tell you. So there are 2 lesbians who get on the bus. I don't care. They're lesbian. I don't care. I don't care that they appeared to be married. I don't care. Okay, that's their right. They're adults. So be it. All right. But they get on the bus. One of the lesbians was enormous and the other one was even larger. Okay, that's fine. That's their right to live their lives as they choose. Again, here's where I drew the line. They brought on the bus 2 boys. They were twin boys. Clearly, these were their boys. Whether or not, the lesbians had these boys through artificial insemination or adoption, I don't know, but they were twin boys. Very cute boys. They appeared to be, if I were a guessing person, around 7 years of age. And the boys get on the bus. And one of the boys sits with one of the moms, and one of the boys goes to the back of the bus with the other mom. The other mom, by the way, had a shaved head and a pink mohawk. And that particular mom probably weighed every bit of 350 pounds. And so don't get mad at me yet, all right? Don't get mad at me, podcast listeners. Here's my problem with this. My problem with this is the fact that there are children in this situation. The best place for a child, and you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again, the most politically incorrect thing one can possibly say in the 21st century in the United States, namely that every child deserves a father and every child deserves a mother. And a father has a penis and a mother has a vagina. Period. And yes, there are divorces out there where kids have a father that lives not in the house, but most of the time the father is involved. But as you know, the left always tries to take you away from the subject matter at hand, which is the best place for children in a household of same-sex marriage, or is it in a household, of course, where you have a father and a mother? Every boy deserves a father, okay? So I know the left is going to say, yeah, but, one of the lesbians can certainly play catch with their sons. Yeah, that's true, of course. One of them can coach the baseball team. Yeah, that's true, too. Of course they can. They have every right to do that, okay? We're not saying... And I'm not saying on Mark and the Millennials that these individuals don't have the right to do the things they're doing. What I'm saying is it proper to bring children into this world in a same-sex marriage where you were denying them intentionally a father. And I'm going to tell you, it is wrong. It is indeed wrong. It is absolutely wrong to bring children into this world knowing that there is no father involved or going to be involved with the children. Likewise, it's equally wrong to bring children into the world when you are denying them a mother. Okay, so now you might say, well, that's awfully conservative. That's awfully intolerant. No, folks, because you weren't listening to what I said. Lefties out there who are listening. What I'm saying is that if you want to, under law today, to get married, you can. As an adult, same sex, that's allowed. Okay, that's the America in the 21st century. But what I'm saying is, why would you bring children into that marriage? Okay, so here's an example. The 7-year-old boys presumably are in, let's say, second grade. And that's what they approximately look like. They're twin boys. So they go to school, they're in second grade, and I would say pretty much everyone they know in their classroom has a dad. Okay? Pretty much everyone in their classroom has a dad and has a mom. And do you not think that those two boys see that and long for the need that every boy needs that guidance that a dad provides, and needs that companionship and that biological similarity? And the answer is yes, of course. Of course. And I want you to know it wasn't just me that thought this, my wife too. My wife looks over to me and she's just rolling her eyes. And it wasn't because these were lesbians. It was because these were lesbians with children. That's what drove her crazy. So it continues to make her feel really badly, as I did for those two boys. And so we can nitpick, of course, around the edges and so forth. And I think a lot of people do that when they watch these particular circumstances. But with me, I'm willing to actually just say it, okay? And it's incredibly frightening for most people even to have this conversation. It's like, well, under the law, they have every right to adopt. Under the law, they have every right to get married. It's like, yes, we know that. We know that. We also know under the law, certainly in my home state of Maryland, the taxpayers pay for lesbians to be artificially inseminated so they can have children. But I'm here to say to you, I think it's wrong. Okay? Yes, it's lawful, but I'm here to tell you that I think it's wrong. And why do I think it's wrong? I'm not even going to begin talking about, I think, what many conservatives would speak about, which is coming from the standpoint of just a religious standpoint. I'm not even going to touch that for the moment, if at all. I'm just talking about the fact that you are intentionally denying a child a household where there is a father. And on the case of same-sex marriage of men, and they actually adopt children, the same thing applies, where they're intentionally denying a child a mother. And I think that's wrong. I think that is child abuse. I'm going to say it. I believe that is child abuse because you are willingly denying the child the right to go to school and to look at the other children who have dads and say, yeah, I don't have that. I don't have that. I've got two moms. And, one is the mom that plays baseball and, the other is the mom that cooks. And I got the millennial on the other side of the camera. It's like cringeworthy, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's talking about this. That's because, millennials grew up in a time when they feel like they have to be silenced about this. And when all that changes, by the way, millennials? When all that, do you know when that changes with the millennials? It changes when they have children themselves. When they have children themselves and they're married, a guy married to a woman married to a guy, and they have children, then they realize, wow, it's really fascinating how young boys need that attention of a father many times, and many other times they need that attention of a mother. Same thing with young girls. Sometimes they need that attention of a mother, and then they also need a very good role model for a father. Common sense, okay? But anyway, I had to go off on that initial tangent as we started this episode of Mark and the Millennials to let you know about this travel experience I had because, the two moms, by the way, their suitcases indicated that they had gone on a Disney cruise with the boys. Okay, so that was nice. Okay, granted, that was nice. They took their twin boys on a Disney cruise. Disney cruises are very expensive, right? But it also kind of fit the narrative of Disney, right? Which is, oh yeah, there are no differences. And we're not going to say good afternoon and good morning, boys and girls of all ages. No. What do they say now, Chris? What's the new term? It's good morning. Dreamers or something. Yeah, good morning, dreamers. Good morning. So, there you have it. There you have it. So I had to give that example to you and I had to give you that little story because there are so few people who are willing to actually talk about this and actually have a conversation about why there are objections, okay? And there's a difference, right? I want to make sure I leave the podcast listeners with this difference, namely that it might be lawful because it is lawful, all right? But what I'm saying is it doesn't mean that it is the right thing to do to bring children into the world in that particular situation. That is selfish, and I think it is child abuse. And I will leave it at that. So next up, podcast listeners, Fauci runs from the red wave. So first of all, is the red wave even real? In the Daily Caller, there's a story that came out today, analysis. There's a key bellwether race that will show whether the red wave hype is for real. Several bellwether races have happened in 2022, like Republican Texas Representative Mayra Flores winning in South Texas. But none touch on national issues quite like the race happening in upstate New York on Tuesday, which is today. The special election for U.S. House District New York number 19 between Republican candidate Mark Molinaro and Democrat nominee Pat Ryan could indicate which party gets control of Congress in November. Molinaro, the third-term county executive for Dutchess County, New York, is running on an anti-Democrat party ticket. His campaign strategy has been to highlight the rising inflation, high gas and energy prices, and the increase in violent crime in his district, and connect those issues to Democrat Party policies. The Republican nominee said in an interview with Breitbart News on Saturday that he is fighting for his district, which has been ignored by state and federal leaders mostly affiliated with the Democrat Party. They know the burden of high taxes. They feel the pain of inflation. Farmers are overwhelmed by costs. Small businesses are over-regulated, Molinaro told the outlet. Quote, New York State needs to lead the nation in out-migration. It already leads the nation in out-migration. More people leave this part of New York than any other place in the country to go to other states that are freer and more affordable. Yeah, well, we just talked about Florida. New York suffers from a single-party rule that continues to add more regulation on local businesses, Molinaro said. Democrats have been in charge of this state government for far too long. We need voices, Republican voices in upstate New York especially, to speak out against these policies. My county cut taxes, property taxes, cut sales taxes on clothing purchases. We cut the gas tax this year because we knew inflation was growing and we needed to provide relief, he told the outlet. On the opposite side of the aisle, the Hudson Valley Democrat, Ryan, has been pushing heavily for progressive issues, especially creating federally protected abortion rights. Winning one of the last toss-up special elections could signify that recent legislative wins for Democrats turned into votes in the ballot box. So this is a special election today, all right? Special election for Congress. So in other words, either the Democrat or the Republican will win and then serve for a whopping 2 or 3 months before they have to run again, which is kind of silly. Ryan, a West Point alum, naturally. So Ryan is the Democrat podcast listeners. He's an alumnus of West Point. So think about that. The Democrats are so smart. So they go up to upstate New York. They know it's a Republican area. So what they do is they recruit a phony military guy from West Point who's a Democrat. I say phony because he's a Democrat, right? I don't see how any Democrat could be a firm military person and go to West Point. And I say that because of what the Democrats have been doing to the military, right? Turning it into a woke military rather than a lean, mean fighting machine to win wars. Ryan, who's the Democrat, graduated from West Point. He debuted his first TV ad focused on the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. He told City and State New York that giving the Democrats control of U.S. Congress again means federal abortion laws on the books, which shows you how stupid he is. Because New York State is controlled by the Democrats. What the Supreme Court did was it threw the decision of how you want to regulate or not regulate abortion rights back to the states. So New York, if anything, will expand abortion rights because it's controlled by the crazy left, progressives, Marxists. And this guy's like, oh no, we need federal legislation. No, dummy. It's a state-by-state decision. And your state isn't going to change anything because it's controlled, the state legislature at least, is controlled by Democrats. Quote, we must rally what is widely popular viewed by Americans that the government should not have a say in individual healthcare decisions, Ryan said. Which is so funny, right? These are the same people that told you, get vaccinated and you need a vaccine passport in order to go into a bar in New York City. I am confident that if we really fight that way, we can codify Roe, and with the principles of Roe, we can put in place things like an assault weapons ban. You gotta love it. So think about that, podcast listeners. Here's Ryan. He's the Democrat running for Congress today. And Ryan is saying, as an alum of West Point, that we need a federal assault weapons ban. In other words, Ryan, as a West Point guy, gets to keep his assault weapons because he's a military guy. But you and I, we must be disarmed, right? We must trust the Democrats who went to West Point to keep their weapons, but we must be, of course, we must give up ours. Ryan told CNN at a canvassing event at Rhinebeck Park on Saturday that the United States Supreme Court's ruling brushed against an American democracy guardrail that transcends some of the other issues. The Iraqi war veteran said that he views abortion as one of the freedoms he fought for during his time in the U.S. Army. That's right. The Iraqi war veteran said that he fought for one of the freedoms, meaning the freedom to, kill babies, unlimited all the way through, of course, the third term and even at birth. That's what he fought for. Yeah, sure. And that it's important to talk about it in the context to help bring voters together. Yeah, he's going to bring voters together that way. Quote, I talk about freedom because I think the most unifying value that Americans share is freedom and a lack of excitement about the government telling us what to do in our lives, he said. So there you go. There's a Democrat who has been advised by really smart political consultants to say, government's telling us what to do. Meanwhile, the whole purpose of Marxism is to tell you what to do, to surrender your individual rights to the state so that the state controls everything, including your health care. And so what he's saying is that Republicans in, southern states who want to limit abortions to 15 weeks, that somehow he's trying to scare people in New York saying, well, the Republicans are somehow going to gain control of New York State and then they're going to abolish abortion altogether. Democrat consultant Bruce Gyrey told City and State New York that the special election is an opportunity to get ahead of the curve in November by building around those issues where independents swing against the Republicans. You ever notice, podcast listeners, that Democrats never actually talk about the importance of life, right? Rather than talking about abortion as, they get really excited about abortion, right? Democrats do. They just can't wait to, as far as I'm concerned, get people to kill babies all the way to the end of the term. It seems like many Democrats believe this and think it's okay and normal. And obviously it isn't normal to do that to a perfectly healthy child. Yet it is allowed in many states, including the state of Maryland, by the way. But do you ever notice Democrats never actually talk about life? They never talk about the importance and the sanctity, how important it is that we have life, that we continue the next generation. We continue our gene pool in the next generation. How important that is. How wonderful it is to have children. How fulfilling that is to have children. They never really talk about that. They never really actually, and we never actually have a media at the same time that is the least bit interested in actually having that whole conversation about what it actually means. Because we're being told by Democrats on the one hand that, and also by demographers, by the way, that there aren't enough people in the United States. That is to say, the population in the United States is not replacing itself. So that's why we need all this immigration, this illegal immigration, is so that we can sustain our population. And yet the Democrats are saying, on the other hand, let's kill as many babies as possible of the people that already live here. Kind of weird, right? Is weird. It's crazy. So is the red wave real? According to Daily Caller, that race in New York will determine in part whether the red wave is real because it is a special election. I think what's happening now is that we are in the dog days of summer. It's August, and the Republicans and the Democrats alike, but mostly the Republicans, aren't really showing their hand yet as to the kinds of campaigns they're going to run the day after Labor Day. Because the real election begins, the real general election begins the day after Labor Day, because that's when everybody starts to unleash the ads and unleash the mail and unleash all kinds of messaging. Republicans really haven't shown their cards yet. Democrats are still searching for a message. I think the Republicans' message is kind of obvious, which is really simple. And that message is, look, everything the Democrats touch, they ruin. Everything. And everything the Democrats want to do to make things better, according to Democrats, is just to grow government. And when one program fails, they just double down on that program to grow it even more. And then that program fails again, and they just want to double down again. That is the Democrat solution to everything. And they literally have destroyed every aspect of our economy, as well as, by the way, as far as I'm concerned, our credibility overseas. Because no one, and I mean no one, is afraid of Joe Biden. Or should I say Barack Obama, who's really running the government right now. But is the red wave real? Well, I have a friend in the Maryland state legislature. His name is Neil Parrott. He's a member of the House of Delegates, and he's running for Congress in Maryland, and he's running in the western part of Maryland. Now, keep in mind that while the western part of Maryland is very Republican, the fact of the matter is that Neil Parrott, his district, as drawn by Maryland state legislature, has a very large part of Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a bunch of federal employees, and they're lefties and, progressives and crazies and so forth. Nonetheless, Neil Parrott looks like he's slightly in the lead against the sitting congressman, which is David Trone, a lefty Democrat who's incredibly wealthy. He owns Total Wine and Beverage, and basically, of course, is a Democrat in large part because it enables him to talk about wealth inequality while at the same time being one of the most wealthy members of Congress, and at the same time using government to further his ends in the business that he's in, which, of course, if anyone knows anything about the liquor business, it's so heavily regulated that the only real way that you can expand your business is through overcoming those regulations, and that requires enormous political clout and money, which David Trone has. So my friend Neil Parrott is running against Congressman David Trone, and Neil Parrott is ahead. He's ahead in a district drawn by Democrats to favor Democrats, really, at the end of the day, because the Democrats in Maryland are convinced that district will one day be overwhelmingly Democrat, I should say. And they think it'll overwhelmingly be Democrat one day because people in the failed county of Montgomery will eventually move to Western Maryland. Because, as you all know out there in podcast land, once Democrats ruin the county in which they live, they move to the red counties and then repeat what they just did in the county that just failed and then ruin that red county. And then they keep moving on and moving on. And we all know that that's how they operate. But nonetheless, I think this race in Western Maryland whereby Neil Parrott, he's a delegate in the state legislature, he's running against Congressman Dave Trone, is also very much a race that is a bellwether of whether there is a real red wave. Nonetheless, the Daily Caller is correct in that this special election in New York will determine who sits in this seat for a few months, and I think New York's 19th district. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the Republican will win overwhelmingly. If the Republican doesn't win overwhelmingly, then it really is his fault at this point. Not to mention that, of course, the New York State legislature, just like they do in Maryland, they gerrymander the heck out of these districts, so they cheat. So you end up having a congressman that doesn't represent your values, even though you live in the country. And so why does this matter with the red wave and whether it is real? Well, because Dr. Fauci thinks it's real. Because Dr. Fauci, he has decided to retire. Why do you think Dr. Fauci has decided to retire? And this is what I think a lot of Americans don't understand. Why now? Well, it's because if the Republicans control the United States House of Representatives, the first thing they're going to do is haul Dr. Fauci into a hearing and ask him questions. You know, like, why did you mandate the vaccine and suggest that it be mandated across the country? And why did you mandate and ask for lockdowns, and just on and on and on and on and on? And also, and probably more important than all of those things, it's hard to believe anything could be more important than that, but also, what did you provide financially to the Wuhan lab or to any lab in China? And when did you provide it, and why did you provide it, and what kind of oversight was there? You ever notice the Democrats have never asked those questions in Congress? They've never invited him to Congress to actually get to the bottom of what's really happening. So Fauci sees the writing on the wall. He would much rather be the former head of the CDC and then be called into Congress to testify than he would be the current head. Because I'm pretty sure that the Republicans are going to ask very good, very solid questions and very fair questions to get to the power grab that the CDC has been engaged in since COVID started. And we also know, and before I read this article about Fauci, we also know that the Republicans are going to take over in November, at least the House of Representatives. We know this because, folks, why do you think the FBI raided Trump's residence just a few months before the midterm elections? They could have done it last year if they really wanted to. They could have done it this past January or February or March. Oh, no. The timing is perfect. The FBI decided to raid Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in August. And I can guarantee you that the Justice Department is going to figure out some way, mark my words, some way of charging and arresting and having pictures of Donald Trump in handcuffs being hauled away right before the November elections. I can guarantee you that's going to happen. Now, do I think it's appropriate? Nope. Do I think the FBI's raid on the Trump residence is appropriate? Of course not. What I do know is this. There's a massive red wave coming across America at every level of government. At every level of government. And the Democrat Party has decided that it is going to raid and did raid Donald Trump's residence just a few months before the election. And I can assure you, like a couple of weeks before the election, 2-3 weeks before the actual day of voting in November, you are going to see the Justice Department arrest Donald Trump or the FBI or whomever. whomever's in charge at the time, they're going to do that because they have to take out Donald Trump and all of the Donald Trump candidates that have succeeded in primaries across America. And you guys know there are a lot of them that have succeeded across America. The only way the FBI can potentially purge those candidates and that the Democrat Party can purge those candidates is by doing what I just said. And so that's why we know there's a red wave. We know there's a red wave because Fauci is retiring. He's terrified of Republicans taking over Congress. And that we know there's a red wave because Donald Trump's home was raided by FBI agents and others who were armed to the T, as if Donald Trump is going to put up a fight with a gunfight. Totally not a Donald Trump thing, right? That's not. I mean, Trump is a lawyer guy, right? He hires an army of lawyers who are armed with papers and very good degrees. He doesn't protect himself with, or his estate with guns against the FBI. That's why it was so obvious. All the optics were there for CNN and MSNBC and ABC and CBS and NBC to show the American people. You see what's going to happen if Republicans take over in November? No, we're going to have people just like Donald Trump in charge. And therefore, we can't possibly risk that. We must stay the course with the Biden Democrats who are destroying America's economy with inflation that is out of control, who are destroying America's military by having as many people on the front lines who are trans because, we know they're totally mentally stable when they're up front at the front lines of a war. And at the same time, we must vote the Democrats in because, climate change, we must make sure that we enrich all of our supporters with climate change free money. And it just goes on and on and on with all the things that they're destroying in our economy, as well as our private lives and our public lives. They're destroying the healthcare system. They're destroying our culture by having unbridled illegal immigration into our country. We don't know who these people are. We don't know where they're going. There's no order, and they're undermining law and order and the rule of law. Of course they are, because in any normal country, you would never, ever, ever arrest, or at this point, they haven't arrested, but raid a former president's residence. So that's why we know, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a red wave and that the red wave is massive. And the only way to stop the red wave or to curtail it is if they arrest Donald Trump. And that's why, and look, for all of those of you who are out there who either like Trump or don't like Trump, because we do have listeners, plenty of them, by the way, who don't. We have listeners who very much do like Donald Trump as well. But for all of you that are out there, does it not worry you that a sitting president in a White House is having his former opponent and his likely future opponent potentially arrested? Does that not bother you? I mean, if it doesn't bother you, then we are in huge trouble. But I think for most people, they should feel really uncomfortable because what if the Republicans did that? And I want you to know right now, I do not support the Republicans using the FBI as the Stasi. I don't. And I don't support the Democrats using the FBI as the Stasi. But what I do know is this: our country is in big trouble. And it's in big trouble because people are losing confidence in its institutions. And when people lose confidence in the institutions of government, and you find that in Washington, D.C., you have more barricades going up here and more barricades going up there, by definition, barricades are an acknowledgement by government that its people aren't happy. Okay? And when its people aren't happy and you got to put up barricades, that looks like very third worldish, right? Looks very Banana Republic-ish, and it's dangerous. There's another reason why I think the raid has occurred with Donald Trump's residence as well. It's not just the red wave, which of course is huge, but also we know that Gavin Newsom is running for president. And I have to tell you guys something. I would love to see a Gavin Newsom Democrat nominee against a Donald Trump, or a Gavin Newsom Democrat nominee against a Governor DeSantis Republican nominee running for president. It would be great. It would be great to see. Because Gavin Newsom is such a tool in California. He's done so many things that make no sense. And here's why I know that Gavin Newsom is going to run for president of the United States. And here's why I know that Gavin Newsom is the anointed one running for president of the United States. So there is this thing called safe injection sites, right? In most blue states, there have been laws that have been passed where there are these things called safe injection sites. In other words, it's a location where drug addicts, primarily heroin addicts, but others, primarily heroin though, they go and they can get a clean needle and they can sit in the air conditioning and they can shoot up heroin safely. And that way, if they overdose, then the safe injection site can also make sure that it takes care of them so that they don't, die. And naturally, what that does, the safe injection sites, is it encourages more and more people, of course, to go to those locations because, they're safe injection sites. And as you can imagine with Democrats, they don't want the safe injection sites in the cities or in the places where Democrats live. They want the safe injection sites in the Republican areas. So I'm giving you this background about Gavin Newsom because Gavin Newsom has decided to veto the safe injection site bill in California. Now, this is very not like Gavin Newsom. And this is why I know he's running for president of the United States, because this governor is the biggest lefty and the biggest phony, there is in California, as far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest phonies in politics across America, period. And in normal times, he would vote for this crazy stuff. Or he would sign a bill that would require safe injection sites, but Gavin Newsom did not. So Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom of California vetoed a bill yesterday that would have set up safe injection sites for drug users in major cities. Don't believe that for a moment. There will be in minor cities and in your neighborhood as well. The legislation, SB 57, sponsored by Democrat State Senator Scott Wiener, whom we've talked about many times, would have authorized centers for people to use drugs in supervised conditions. Okay, what they're not saying in this article is to use illegal drugs, life-threatening drugs, not life-helping drugs, in locations, according to the bill's text. The sites would remain open through 2027 as a pilot program in an attempt to prevent overdoses by providing medical support for drug users. Quote, the unlimited number of safe injection sites that this bill would authorize, facilities which could exist well into the latter part of the decade, could induce a world of unintended consequences, Newsom wrote in his veto message. It is possible that these sites would help improve the safety and health of our urban areas, but if done without a strong plan, they could work against its purpose. So there's Newsom right there. A normal Newsom response would be, hey, I'm all in on this safe injection site stuff. Getting the drug addicts off the street and into the places where they can. And we all know that once a drug addict shoots up, they're going to go right back out on the street. And this is going to encourage more illegal drug use. And this all matters, podcast listeners, because Gavin Newsom, who rejected and vetoed this bill, clearly is running for president because the bill is indefensible in a society where drugs are everywhere, in a society where people are dropping dead of fentanyl because of illegal immigration, many of whom are working for cartels and bringing fentanyl across the border, okay? In a modern society where this is happening, where children are dying, young adults are dying left and right, and they're dazed and confused, so many people, Gavin Newsom knows this would not sell across America. It is not a good thing to run on. So he has vetoed this bill. He has vetoed the State Senator Scott Wiener bill, SB 57, for safe injection sites. And I find that kind of fascinating, but also validating that Gavin Newsom will be, without question, the 2024 nominee for president. And we can see this happening. We can see the setup. And so the setup's going to be Gavin Newsom, Democrat, running for president against either DeSantis or Trump. And of course, what the Democrats want to do, what the Biden White House and the FBI want to do, and Liz Cheney, of course, and many others, is to have Donald Trump arrested and to try Donald Trump and hopefully convict him. This is what they want to do, so that he won't be eligible to run for president of the United States, or that he will be too busy defending himself, which is what they've done since the day Donald Trump was elected. Kind of fascinating, isn't it? And speaking of how corrupt and crooked the deep state is, CNN. Have you guys seen what's been happening at CNN? In the Daily Wire, a report says, who's next on CNN chopping block after Brian Stelter was ousted? So CNN, of course, is hemorrhaging people because CNN, no one watches it. Bottom line, the axe is expected to keep swinging at CNN, where new president Chris Licht just fired longtime Reliable Sources host Brian Stelter. I love those names, Reliable Sources. And is taking aim at the network's moribund morning show, The New Day, according to a report. I love that word, moribund. The firing of Stelter came with a cryptic warning as Licht seeks to pivot from far-left editorializing programs to a more straight news approach. The change was reportedly pushed by parent company Warner Brothers Discovery chief shareholder John Malone. So John Malone owns a lot of Discovery shares, of course, a lot. And as many of you know, AT&T owned Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers owns HBO, and they also own, of course, CNN and other properties. Well, AT&T kept CNN intact as part of Warner Brothers when AT&T owned Warner Brothers. And, of course, by default, they own CNN. And AT&T loved the left-wing crazy nut jobs that were running CNN and that were on CNN. Problem is that AT&T was hemorrhaging money and not growing as a company because their primary business is what? Cell phones and telecommunications. So AT&T earlier this year spun off Warner Brothers and combined Warner Brothers with Discovery. And so that is the new company of which CNN is part. Problem is John Malone, who owns a lot of Discovery shares, has decided, you know what? CNN cannot stay in its current form and continue to lose money because this is now a different company that doesn't have AT&T as the big corporate giant to subsidize stuff. It needs to make money. And John Malone is a guy that wants to make money. Quote, I want to acknowledge that this is a time of significant change, and I know that many of you are unsettled, Licht reportedly told staffers on an editorial staff Friday. Licht, of course, being the guy ahead of CNN now. There will be more changes, and you might not understand it or like it. You know what's funny is when a CEO has to say this. I mean, it's like, isn't it kind of obvious CNN is a terrible network that no one watches? By definition, a good network is one which people watch. A bad one, people don't watch. So, of course, you make changes when people aren't watching your network. Why would you have to explain that to people? You have to explain that to the left, though. You do realize that. If you're a reporter on CNN, you can't imagine why things would have to change. You know, why? Why do things have to change? I don't understand. Why is it necessary that people even watch us? Everybody I know likes what I do. RadarOnline.com reported that New Day, the show started by Licht's predecessor, Jeff Zucker, is circling the drain. It will be replaced by a roundtable type program patterned after MSNBC's Morning Joe. Oh, God. Possibly hosted by Jake Tapper, according to Radar Online. Licht has reportedly tried to hire Morning Joe husband-wife hosts Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski away from the rival liberal cable news network. Chris comes from the same breeding ground as Zucker, morning television, a CNN insider told Radar Online. He wants to establish a popular morning show that sets the agenda for the network each day. He doesn't want to change anchors frequently. He wants strength and stability and believes it all starts in the all-important morning time slot. Zucker launched New Day in 2013 with hosts Chris Cuomo, we know what happened to him, Katie Bouldouin, and Michaela Pereira. Blue-pilled former Fox News host Allison Camerata later joined the show, but was replaced as well. The current lineup includes Breonna Taylor and John Berman. The changes come after Licht told CNN staffers over the summer that he understood the network had undergone a lot of changes in a short amount of time after Jeff Zucker was fired from his role leading the company. And by the way, podcast listeners, as all of you know, CNN had this issue and has had this issue for the past year where people keep falling like flies because they're engaged in pornography or pedophilia or worse. And CNN has known all this has been occurring under AT&T's ownership, and AT&T covered it all up and looked the other way. And now that AT&T has spun off CNN, the truth is finally coming out, namely that these people are predators. They're bad people. You would never watch them because you would never respect them, number one. And number two, that the CNN company just doesn't make any money. In fact, it loses a ton of money. So you're going to need to make all these changes. And so the big question is, who will be next on CNN? What will they do? How will they actually survive? How will they actually make money? I don't know what the answer to that question is, but I will tell you this. Maybe they should just start reporting what's happening. Not opining, not editorializing, just report what's happening. Not fine. I mean, Donald Trump's house was raided today by X amount of FBI agents. There's not a lot of information as to why they did that. The court order has been sealed, and as we learn more information, we'll provide it to you. That would be fine. That'd be a fair report because it would be, kind of just the news. But they don't want to do that at CNN. CNN is a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party, but also of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, without question. And I want to finish with this, podcast listeners. Teachers Union president defends school district that will lay off white teachers first. Can't make this stuff up. American Federation of Teachers president Randy Weingarten defended a contract. I'm going to say it again. Randy Weingarten defended a contract between Minneapolis Public Schools and the union, which will fire white teachers over minority teachers. I just can't believe I'm reading this. Now you know why, by the way, just reading that first paragraph, podcast listeners. Now you know why the Democrat Party was always the party of Jim Crow and slavery. Now you know why. Nothing has changed. Okay? Because this is the same party that tries to separate people just like they did in Jim Crow based on the way they look. I mean, it's the same thing here. We're going to judge you not by the content of your character. We're going to judge you not by how good of a teacher you are, not by how well your students are doing and how competent you are as a teacher. Oh no. If we need to fire teachers, we're going to fire white teachers first, solely based on the way they look. I mean, this is the beginning of the end of public education. And the fact that Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers would think this is okay tells you why it's so important to pull your kids out of school as soon as you can. And if you can, homeschool them, or send them to private school if you can afford it, or go to your state legislature and your local government and advocate for freedom of education, namely, have tax dollars follow the student. The March contract This is continuing the article, by the way. The March contract between Minneapolis Public Schools and the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers includes a deal that fires teachers who are not a part of underrepresented populations first, instead of basing termination on seniority. Weingarten tweeted in an article by Associated Press with a quote from Greta Callahan, the president of the teachers chapter of Minneapolis Federation of Teachers. This, Weingarten tweeted, following by a quote from Callahan. And here's what it says. And remember, Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten, retweeted what I'm about to read. This, period, quote, the same people who want to take down teachers' unions and blame seniority are now defending it for white people. This is all made up by the right wing now. Greta Callahan at MFT 59. Callahan said the new contract does not threaten any job because there are vacancies in the school district, according to the AP. She also added that the contract will help account for minority teachers who have quit in the past few years. So podcast listeners, here's the takeaway from this. You have American Federation of Teachers Union President Randy Weingarten, who supports this idea of firing people based on the way they look first when you have to get rid of teachers, okay? And then you have a massive teacher shortage nationwide for a whole variety of reasons. Much of it is COVID related. It's also related to the crazy policies that have come out of blue state legislatures across the United States of America. And yet, despite the fact that you have so few people who want to go into the teacher's profession because of the craziness that's going on in the public school system, Randy Weingarten is doubling down and saying, well, when we do get to that point where we need to fire people because so many kids are leaving the public school system, which, by the way, is happening, not just teachers leaving, but students leaving because the parents are putting them in private school and they're homeschooling them. When we do get to that point, we're going to decide who to fire based on the way they look, not based on the way they perform. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your modern teachers union that represents all teachers, according to them, nationwide. And that's the last word for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, through social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.